Bye-bye. Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to this week's Up Close session. We're coming to you from chilly Melbourne in Australia, but we have Australian EDM royalty in Honeysmack. I was going to say Dave Haberfeld straight up, but AKA Honeysmack. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for joining the HKBU Music Department Up Close sessions.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we're here in Dave's studio, and the proceedings for tonight, we thought what we would do is Dave actually streamed something 3 weeks ago. To this point has had, what, 500,000 views?
The festival itself overall, I think, is over 500,000 views.
Yep.
I think there was about 8 or 10 live electronic dance music artists. So everyone was live from around the world, a couple in Australia, the UK and Germany as well. And my set got, I think it's up to about 63,000 views so far.
Which is incredible. But you are dance royalty anyway. So
wow, factory will get you everywhere.
No. So coming off the back of something that I did a couple of weeks ago, which is a DJ set, and looking at EDM or electronic dance music, we thought it would be fitting to have Dave come in, or Honeysmack come in, and talk through what he actually does. You can probably see quite a bit of gear here, some old analog gear and so forth as well. And what we will do is actually watch a 30-minute set. The actual set goes for an hour, but we'll watch the first 30 minutes and then we'll come back. We might run some gear, and then we'll have a Q&A session about real-time composing in EDM.
Yeah.
So,
well, the thing to note is that also that the festival was streamed literally from this position.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're about to see when we do throw to the stream is this position, exactly where the camera is, pretty much, but maybe up a little bit higher. But what I might do before we actually go to the stream, I might get you, Dave, if it's okay, just to explain to our audience what it is that you do. I know what you do, but this will also help me in understanding a little bit more about what you do and real-time composition in the realms of electronic dance music.
Okay, so I've been producing and performing live electronic dance music for 25, 30 years. So what I'm actually doing is I actually have an array of synths and drum machines that I am performing and improvising with in the moment. So I'm not writing sequences or patterns, and there's no recall. A lot of the synths that I have don't have memories or anything like that, and I don't have patch notes. It really is a moment in time. I set up certain things like perhaps some a basic kick drum or something like that, but really I'm improvising through all the machines. So whilst we consider small items to be instruments, I really am performing with what I label my studio instrument. So I don't see, one drum machine or one synthesizer as an instrument. I see them as modules as part of my whole instrument. So I'm actually responding in real time to the happy accidents and the risks that I take.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think this is, having seen the set anyway, and watching the whole thing multiple times, the only thing that I could say to you out there, the audience tonight, is I wouldn't say sit back and relax, maybe like the set that I did a couple of weeks ago, but strap yourself in like you're going for a car ride. And then we'll watch the 30-minute stream, and we'll come back and we'll actually take some questions and run through some of this gear.
Sorry to cut you off. I'm saying, when you watch this, I haven't pre-rehearsed this. I literally turn machines on and I just start, and which I'll explain afterwards how I do it. Yep. But there's no predetermined patterns or songs or anything like that. It's just one contiguous performance that kind of evolves, and I construct and deconstruct, but I'll tell you more later. It's okay to dance.
It's okay to dance. And what I have neglected to do, and this is deliberately neglected to do, was not talk about your CV and what you've done up until this point. We'll do that once we come back after the live stream, because a lot of that will also roll into your approaches to composition.
Yeah, sure, of course.
So without any further ado, I'll throw over to the tech team. Enjoy the first 30 minutes of this 1 hour, and I will ask the tech team later on to actually share the full YouTube link with you so you can actually watch it after we finish here.
Or go to my YouTube channel.
Or go to the YouTube
it's
channel.
full of, live sets.
Live sets and tutorials.
Yeah.
So we will see you in 30 minutes. Enjoy. Like I said, sit back, but definitely buckle up. And we'll see you in 30 seconds. Not 30 seconds.
See you on the other side.
On 30 minutes. We'll see you then.
So I didn't blab too much.
Next up, we have Honeysmack, an Aussie acid legend. Got a brand new album called Post Acid, and his sound is deep experimental acid. Check him out.
Home. Nobody else comes through. It's just him and me. Nobody else comes through. It's just him and me.
outside world exists. Might as well be living on the fucking moon. There's all kinds of ghettos in the world. It's all one ghetto, man. Giant gutter in outer space.
Wowza. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Gene Shill here with Honeysmack and Leo. So this is Leo. So there's an introduction to Acid House with Honeysmack. We were just chatting before over a cup of tea about approaches to improvisation. And all I can say is what? Only because, you know, coming from a jazz background as a saxophonist, you know, there's a lot of crossover. But first and foremost, can you please explain how do you get to this point? Like, what are you actually doing?
Well, we might need more than half an hour to explain, but let me give you the abridged version. So my background, perhaps I'll just give you a little context. My background, I'm not a traditionally trained musician whatsoever. So I actually can't play an acoustic instrument. I don't have any music theory yet. I've taught at the Conservatorium here in Melbourne and been in teach at universities as well. So my approach is very much about what I would term as knowing your instrument, all right? And knowing the instrument is actually the studio instrument. So the way in which I do this is, because it is electronic dance music, it is driven by pulse. There is a steady beat. So really it starts off really with just kind of a kick drum, 4x4 kick drums. I actually know what 4x4 is. So.
4 beats to the bar.
That's right. And when I started doing this a long time ago, I didn't understand what the black and white things are on, what do you call them? Piano? Are they still called pianos? Yeah.
Still cool, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know what they meant. And I bought a little synthesizer called a 303, which I'm holding here, which is the original one that I bought, you know, all those years ago. And the sequencer on it, I just kind of randomized pitches and it just spat out this weird rhythm and pulse. And from there, you know, it grew and grew and grew. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question yet, but that's what we're intending to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm trying to get to the point kind of quickly is that I'm synchronizing a whole lot of different machines that are doing different things. I certainly don't say I don't play pattern 1 from this machine and pattern 1 from that machine. A lot of these machines, like I said before, they don't have any memories or any patch memories or recall or whatsoever. And I kind of, you know, the thing I do beforehand is first of all, make sure it's all in sync. And, you know, a lot of the older vintage machines, I can't write in real time. So I'm filling them up with kind of patterns, but I'm playing through the patterns as well, seeing what fits, and I'm setting up kind of happy accidents. So there's no mistakes. There's only a continuous flow, I guess.
We were chatting before and we sort of likened it to maybe, I'll go back to a jazz combo setting. And for our audience out there tonight, if you've got your head around some theory, even if we were talking about a 2-5-1 progression, you know, just in the key of C, we were talking about that shape and that might be something that I can approach or in an ensemble, and then the nuances come from other instrumentalists as well.
Yep.
But although there's crossover there, how do you set yourself up potentially? I know this is a bit of a weird question, but to get happy accidents, to get those nuances that will then drive you or get your ear to really hone into something else and then sort of go off on a bit of a tangent. Because, I mean, we see it all the time, or we saw it in the stream in particular, where we would hear a really definite sort of phrase or riff and it became quite static, and then all of a sudden there was a polyrhythm, and then you jump on that and you go somewhere else. So how do you get to that point?
Okay, so there's a couple of things. Is how I set up the actual performance or how I set up my instrument. So remember that the entirety of all these machines is my instrument. And what I need to do is, this looks excessive, and you're right, it is excessive. But what it gives me options, and it helps promote those risk and happy accidents, because I'm not cueing instruments or sounds, I should say, or phrases like a DJ would. Right. You know, like a DJ is queuing up records. Yeah. So I don't have, I really don't have notes to tell me, oh, pattern one over here is doing something particular, what have you. So those accidents occurred by me just experimenting with, oh, a pattern from over there, a pattern from over here, and what will this knob do? So what I have to actually do is a couple of things. I have to be attuned to what that machine will do, have an understanding of the limitations and the functions of that particular machine.
Okay.
And, and basically what I'm doing is I'm scrambling an egg and trying to unscramble it, which I can never do.
Yeah, right.
So, in regards to kind of improvisation, I will call what I do real time as opposed to improvisation, even though I am actually improvising. So whereas a traditional, jazz musician or instrumentalist will play their instrument, they will get to probably, a solo where they're kind of, highlighting, their phrase or what have you. I'm not doing that. I'm not getting to a solo. I'm getting to a particular density of texture and rhythms and sounds, because pitch and tone, I'm completely pitch and tone deaf. I don't know what that means.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Go
right now. Hang on,
Yes.
2 seconds. As I head over here for a second, just need to check something, everybody. Sorry. Hopefully everybody can see and hear us okay. Yeah. So
Can see and hear me okay?
I'm going to put you on the spot with a question.
Yes.
So don't hate me for this.
I
okay?
wouldn't.
The term, we know what it's called, sonic signature.
Yep.
Okay. So you've got this gear. How do you, as an instrumentalist can and does on their instrument, depending on what violin you might buy, saxophones, trumpets, whatever, how do you define or really sculpt your sonic signature? How do people know who Honeysmack is? If you can buy, and this is not an insult, people, when I say this, but some of the gear has been not mass produced, but it's generic at the time as drum machines and analog gear goes, as we will see in a minute. How do you get to that point where you actually develop your sonic signature, and what does that mean to you?
That's a really good question. Now I have to think a little bit about
I'm sorry.
that. No. Okay. So I can answer your question a number of ways. So when I started doing this, I was using, well, I still am, I'm using the traditional instruments of electronic dance music, okay, which was the 909, the 303s, and that's how I actually began. And I started my practice at the time when electronic dance music was becoming popular in the late 80s, early 90s. So those sounds, they are found throughout all of electronic dance music, regardless of genre.
Sure.
So I guess where I find my sonic signature or my ID is through, I guess, the sum of all the sounds, and actually how I'm manipulating those sounds in real time. Now, I know haven't answered your question as such, but one of the signature sounds for Honeysmack was the 303, the acid sound.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
But it's not just the 303 sound. Like, for instance, I just did a live stream the other night, and I called it acid techno. So the 303 is what we call acid, and when house music turned into acid, it's that squelchy, raspy sound. So that would be, one of the signature sounds for Honeysmack. And I have about 15 303s. I have 2 originals and 1,000, 15 clones. So the other night I did an acid techno live stream, but there was no 303. So it's about that kind of, resonant filter, raspiness, how it modulates, how I am manipulating it in real time, and, that kind of shape and texture, I guess, is the Honeysmack sound.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think what we might do then is just segue into or onto the desk here, so we can have a look at some of the gear that really shapes that sound as well. So we did promise you before that we would have a look at some of Dave's gear, and then we'll sort of segue again into where that's actually taking you before we actually take some questions from the audience. Yeah.
So how it starts.
How it starts. 5. What are your 5? I'm going to put you on the spot again. 5 favorite pieces of kit.
303, the 303, the
Yep.
303, and probably
The 303.
a 303.
Okay, cool.
Look, going back to perhaps some of the other questions is how do I start? And how I start is how I pair different machines.
Okay.
So, you know, I set up a lot of options, but there's always, I think it always starts with a 909 and a 303. Even though they may not be a sound that continues throughout, or maybe I won't even use it whatsoever, it's the default. And maybe it's a default just because that's how I began.
And
making
historically, what does, again, for the people at home, the audience that have never seen a drum machine or synthesis or synthesizers, what is the 303 and the 909?
So the 303 is a monophonic bassline synthesizer. It was made as a busker's tool in the early to mid 80s. It was a complete failure. It came from the same. It came from the same idea as a drum machine. So as a busker's tool, you know, a mobile musician, but it was so difficult to program the 303 with a particular musical, you know, outcome that the 303 was actually stopped manufacturing within 1 year.
Oh, really?
And they were such a failure, but they've become the accidental hero.
Yeah.
Actually, the 303 in my research, in my PhD, I actually, you know, label this as it's the electric guitar of electronic dance music.
Amazing.
It doesn't matter what genre, you've heard the 303 sound. It's been cloned. There's been 2 hardware clones every year produced by different manufacturers since its demise, and that's not including the software clones. Right. And again, it's a really limited piece of kit. It only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 real-time controls with filter, decay, and accent. It is, you know, there's no screens. There's just kind of blinking LED lights.
And is it possible to hear it at the moment?
Yes, of course. Let me just.
Because I'm just thinking what we can do is I can take your microphone. We actually tried to set up some gear to run through so you could hear it, but it wasn't really working out for us. However, we do have a workaround. So lovely.
And that's the sound of the 303.
Excellent.
Now,
Thank you.
I'll even go one further, and I can show you how I actually program it because it's completely utterly random. I'll just make sure this is a pattern I may want to keep. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear this pattern.
Sorry, I just let Leo out. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. And I'm just going to look at this. I'll look at the camera and just tap some of these. That's pretty random, would you say?
Very random.
Okay, cool. And you can't actually put the timing qualities and the pitch qualities at the same time. Well, you can, but you know, for all intents and purposes, we're not going to do that.
Yep.
And I'm just going to add some kind of 16th notes, and it sounds like this. Exactly what I've just done for you.
Love it.
Now, remember, this machine was made to you know, emulate an electric bass. Ain't sound like an electric bass whatsoever.
Definitely not. Definitely
Okay.
not.
The 909, I've got actually the boutique version here, and I've got the real version just sitting to my side over there. You'll have seen the big beige machine in the stream. So the 909 was the first MIDI capable drum machine from Roland. It came out in 1982. Again, complete and utter failure, commercial failure, because you have to remember that this kind of technology at the time was marketed and geared towards real musicians. You know, it wasn't made for electronic dance music musicians because it didn't exist. And the drum machine was poo-pooed by, you know, the conservatorium or, you know, by real musicians because it didn't sound like real drums. So again, you have young producers, bedroom producers who are buying this gear because it's cheap, not because of what it sounds like, But then what happens is it became the sound of electronic dance music, and particularly house music. And the 909, which you've heard in every single house track or techno track,
even my work,
even your work,
even my work,
and it sounds exactly like this.
Lovely.
That's the 909.
That's the 909.
So literally, my career started with just the 909 and 303,
303.
which is you put them together and they sound like this. And when I started performing, I literally did perform with just the 909 and the 303 and I think an effects box.
Yeah.
And that's Honeysmack.
Fantastic. It actually
was Honeysmack.
No, is Honeysmack.
Is Honeysmack. I'm still alive.
It sort of it blows my mind in particular, like being here and knowing Dave anyway, but just the approach to this, and it's a very holistic approach, although, you know, you're using the affordances of certain equipment to get that outcome. However, there's something about it that is just so holistic and unique that you can fall in love with it so quickly. So,
well, that's actually really true. It's not just falling in love, but what I do is, and maybe it's not that academic, but I lose myself in the array of options and sounds and sequences and phrases. And that's where the outcomes come from. You asking me, you know, just in the break, you asking me, or how do I make an album, you know?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we'll take some questions in a minute, but this will be the last sort of question or piece of dialogue that Dave and I have for the interim. And I did ask Dave before, how do you make an album? So for myself, as you well know, I will develop motives. I do different things. There's lots of guitars, there's saxophone, there's things. But for you, how do you do it?
Okay, so how I do it, because it's all improvised or done in real time, everything is a moment in time. So I don't craft phrases, like I said before, that are paired with, you know, certain machines. So most recently, I did an album for Carl. Oh.
That's all right. We'll keep going. We're nearly there. So.
Okay. I did an album for.
Just a quick message for everybody at the moment. Could you please turn your microphones off for the interim, just while we finish this last piece of dialogue, please, because we can hear everything. So please finish.
So I just recently did an album for Carl Cox's Awesome Soundwave.
Yep.
So, you know, I had to give them, I gave them a taste of what I was doing, but I knew the label manager as well. And I simply took an array of gear down to his studio and we hit record and just literally improvised and played for 11 hours. And then just cut out the, you know,
what you wanted, and that was it.
Yes, I've done some interviews for like Decoded magazine. Talk a bit more detail about that. So if you want to process,
yeah. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll actually throw over to the Q&A session now. I will get the tech team to actually put up Dave's website. You've got the YouTube and interviews and so forth as well. But what I would really like for the next sort of 15 minutes, if possible, please throw us some questions about even approaches to composition in real time, anything else to do with the gear. So I'm actually going to make my way back over here so I can see who's actually asking questions. We can both hear and we will both respond. So let's take our first question, please.
You see, just when you want to ask them a question, everyone goes quiet.
Everyone goes quiet. Okay, do we have any questions?
Don't be shy,
please?
I won't bite. Leo's not in the room. He doesn't bite either.
Leo has left the building.
Whilst I'm at it, I will start finding some more.
We can play some elevator music. Okay, here we go. We've got one for you.
Yep.
Okay. So let me just shift my screen a little bit and I'll read this out to you so you can hear it.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so how do you prepare your sample rhythm to your machine? So synthesis, drum, or garage band. So is it all inbuilt, or do you use samples that you can actually send to some of the gear, or is it all inbuilt?
There is no samples whatsoever. Everything is pretty much either a digital or an analog synth engine that's creating the sounds. But what I do use, I actually use a sampler, but I do live resampling of certain parts of the instrument or the setup. For instance, I've got the 303 here that I'm resampling with the Octatrack. So let's hear the 303. And now I'm going to sample it in real time. And as I move the crossfader across, you'll actually hear it recut.
Nice.
So, but I don't save that at all. That's literally part of the performance. So there is no software. I don't use software, even though I teach people how to use Ableton, and Logic, and I've used software for 30 plus years. I don't actually use software to compose at all. Software is pretty much a tape recorder for me.
And I think it's also important to note that the parameters, and again, the affordances of what we've got here in general are so powerful that sometimes, we do get caught up in, maybe when we're producing in Ableton and we might use like an LFO, we might use something else, but these have all the same things as well. And essentially we've designed from these as well.
Yeah, and also it's the physiology as well of having a physical synth or drum machine, is that I can actually turn a knob, whereas with software you have to get a controller and you have to assign it.
Yep.
And a lot of the software that is available today and the sounds are actually being sampled from these instruments, because they haven't been made for 30-40 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
the 808 drum machine right here is the sound of hip hop,
Yeah.
but I've had this since I can remember.
Okay, next question. So any suggestions for gear or software for beginners?
Just buy anything. Buy something.
Buy
Because,
anything.
Yeah, I think it's
Just start.
it's
really.
a question I get all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Where do I start? Yeah.
What synth module do I buy? What drum machine do I buy? I think it's important that the individual finds their approach through what they can afford.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's no right or wrong. I mean, if you buy a piece of gear and it doesn't resonate with you, you sell it, you buy something else.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Ableton's fantastic software. There's it's a stable of electronic dance music production and arrangement, and but with kind of hardware, I mean, today it's just there's an abundance of stuff. When I started making music, if there was only a few machines and we couldn't afford it, so we actually had to swap and share.
I think something else that's quite important about this is buying a piece of gear and then learning it inside out.
Yeah.
Before you actually, sometimes people will get rid of it because it's too hard, or, or it's the capabilities are enormous and it can be overwhelming. But
this is the
believer, get in there and use it as much as you can. Learn
Well, these traditional, early electronic dance music instruments, they were used by young producers in the complete opposite way they were intended for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very common that people want, every function machine has to be able to do everything. And I think that's not true. These early machines are incredibly limited in comparison to today's, DSP and microchip technology. It's like, but they breed creativity.
Yeah, which is what we're here for.
Exactly.
Okay, do we have any other questions, please, while we have everybody here? So we've had a couple of really great questions. Feel free to jump in, please.
I'm sorry if that doesn't answer the question specifically, but
it definitely does.
There's no right or wrong. Just buy something and start,
try it. Yeah.
Start making it. Start getting around it.
I did read a statistic somewhere that most people only use, I think it's 5 or 10% of Ableton's capacity.
It's incredible.
It's incredible, you know, like you
But
said.
there's so hardware these days, you know, and modular synths. There's an abundance of amazing stuff and really affordable as well, you know, in comparison to, you know, 20 years ago where, you know.
So two questions. What is the most expensive piece of kit that you have, and what is the cheapest piece of kit you have? Piece of gear.
Well, you know, the 303 cost me, you know, 30 years ago, it cost me 40 Australian dollars. You know, today a 303 is worth $4,000 or $5,000.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much an 808 goes these days. You know, that's probably upwards of
A lot.
5,000-6,000.
Exactly.
You know, I have a booklet easel, which is fairly expensive. I guess all the old, you know, the 909, the 808, and the 303s would be probably the most valuable, along with the booklet easel. Yeah, but I don't, you know, I'm not buying. I never bought electronic instrumentation as commodities.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
They are
It's not that.
instruments, and that's why I have so much, because this is a history of my music making.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's like books. You know, I don't ever sell a book because I can always refer to it. You know, and it's the options. You know, having more options. That's why I love, you know, modular synths. You know, I've got. There's a reason why they call it Euro crack. You know, and I'm trying to get this down. You know, so I love this stuff. You know, this came from the 303 pretty much. This is modular synths, where each module made by different manufacturers, and you put them together, you know. And this is basically, you know, when you buy a synthesizer, it's internally patched. Well, this is going back to early synthesis design, where you have to patch it yourself.
I have another 2 questions for you. One from Matt in particular.
Hey, Matt.
Where do you look for inspiration?
The world around us, you know. It's really important to, you know, to listen to as much music as you can, you know, be inspired by art, whether it's visual art, performance art. You know, life should be inspiring, you know.
Artists in particular? Just tacking on the end of that question before we get on to the next one, because the next one's deep.
I like people who think differently. So, you know, it can be anyone from, you know, I love people who are not musical, but people like Vivienne Westwood, you know, who's part of the early punk movement. She's a fashion designer.
Yeah.
But then, you know, talk about contemporaries, people like, say, Richie Houghton and Jeff Mills.
Yeah.
You know,
Jeff Mills. Amazing.
But I love, you know, I love black metal. I love, you know, I come from a punk background. This is where, you know, which we're not going to get into today. But that's where I come from. I come from a punk rock background.
Yeah. This question is a great question. So from the team, from the audience at home. So for your type of music, is there a parameter, call it a composition as such, as something that has an opening and then it closes, or a start and a finish?
No, there is no start, there is no finish.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason there's a start and finish is because I actually have to press play to synchronize everything. But there is no, the only limitation is that when I perform live, or if I'm putting together, well, if I perform live, as I'm either performing live in the studio or in front of a live audience. But these days, you know, we're not in front of live audiences. But it's actually the same thing. When I perform in front of a live audience, I'm just, I take a slice of this. I may not have, you know, 19 machines in front of me. I might have only 4 or 5. And the only limitation is that I've been given a time slot. So I'll play between here and here. And that's the only limitation. But otherwise, I could keep going. There was a festival I did, you know, in February, one of the last festivals we did. And I was in a room and it was quite fluid, and they said, I'd start playing, and I ended up playing like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that. And where I was only supposed to play an hour, but they wanted me to keep going. You know? So I didn't even realize it felt like it was only 15 minutes.
Yeah, so it can be an infinite amount,
right.
you know, which I think is such an incredible question, but also a great answer too, because it's, you know, does it have a start? Yes, because I push play. Does it have a finish? For you in this context, yes, because I pressed
Yeah,
start.
because someone's tapping you on
And
the
Tommy
shoulder
Shoulder,
saying,
go
stop,
home,
you
yeah.
know.
Someone
Can you
else
stop,
needs to
please?
play. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, what we might try and do is take one more question. It's currently, I guess, in your time, what is it, 7:40, 20 to 8 Hong Kong time. So we'll take one more question if possible.
How you doing, Hong Kong?
Please. Just waiting for something or a question to come up on the chat function.
And the whole discussion of analog versus digital, it doesn't matter. You know, the early machines were analog because that was the technology at the time.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays there's digital, but it doesn't matter. If it sounds good to you, that's all that matters, you know.
It's a tool, as you said, it's an instrument. These are your instruments. You know,
and
this
you
is your
know,
voice.
the question about what should you buy, go to a store, have a quick play, check it out online, you know, and just start playing. You know, it doesn't matter, you know, if it's had a good review or a bad review, or if your friend thinks it's good or bad. What matters is what you think, and to find your approach through your machines or through your actual technology, whether it's software, a hybrid setup. You know, software is incredible. And, you know, the thing with, like Gene was saying, is that, you know, we now live in a time where we have access to every sound imaginable. Now, only 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, we live in such, you know, incredible times. And, you know, considering the, you know, the situation the world is in, now is the best time to be making music and to be studying. It's like incredible time. This is the perfect opportunity that all those people have been whinging about, oh, I don't have the time to make music. Well, guess what? Now you do have the time to make music. So let's hear it.
Exactly. And then study at HKBU in our department. Thank you. I just needed to throw it out there. Now, actually, we have two questions to finish with. Actually, I'm going to take three. There's three here. Okay. And then what I'm going to get you to do is play out.
Okay.
And that will close out the up close session with you having a bit of a noodle, as we would call it. So 3 questions.
I'll try and answer them short.
Yeah.
Be quick. Okay.
So when you perform,
yes.
So when you perform,
yes.
How do you feel? Do you feel like you're a composer or a performer?
It's both. It's both, because I'm composing in real time. So the tracks are actually, they are revealing themselves as I perform. So it's a really good question, and it's, you can read my PhD because it will.
Okay, second question. So how do you think about the difference between your style and then a DJ? And I know you've had this question quite a lot over the last couple of months. But
yeah, it's I get this all the time. I am not a DJ because I am creating the music in real time with the actual instruments themselves. Now, the key here is also that DJing has evolved, and DJing is actually quite sophisticated, whereby DJs will now, you know, kind of loop and edit small parts of a playback of a track. But what I'm doing is I'm not playing back a track. I am creating a track in real time, whereas DJs, predominantly for argument purposes, are playing a pre-recorded track.
Amazing. Thank you. And last question before we finish up. So who would you like, or most like, sorry, to collaborate with?
Tina Turner. No. No,
actually, that would be...
Not to take anything away from Tina Turner. Who would I love to collaborate with? That's
going to come back over here.
That's a hard question, because I love collaborating with any other musician, no matter what their practice, because every single person brings a different lens and focus and filter to what they do. So here in Melbourne, Australia, I'm actually fortunate that I have lots of different friends who are musicians, and not only electronic, but also traditional. And, you know, I have so many opportunities to perform with other people, and I love it. So, you know, one person in particular, James Brown. There you go. I'd love to have, you know, worked with someone like James Brown. I met James Brown, and I think he's one of the most important musicians of our time. You know, I mean, you put me on the spot.
You heard it here, up close session. So what we might do,
yes,
I might get you to play out while I just say a couple of words to finish
sure.
with.
I'm going to put the microphone on the stand.
We'll put the microphone on the stand. You'll be able to hear everything. But
thanks, everyone, by the way. Hope you've enjoyed it.
So on behalf of myself, the audience at home, and then the music department and HKBU. We'd like to thank you enormously and for being so gracious with your time. And don't forget that to check out Dave's website. We'll post that. Check out the second half of the set that we watched. And also, don't forget to join me next week where I talk to Tim Dalton about international artist management. And we're talking about this man has managed and produced for Faith No More, Beastie Boys, De La Soul, Public Enemy, Atomic Kitten, the list goes on. So we've got Dave on one side, then we've got artist management next week. So don't forget to join me and the rest of the team here next week. But to finish this evening, I'd like to say thank you for coming and thank you for supporting us, HKBU. And I'm going to throw over to Honeysmack. Thank you once again.
Thank you.